Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Townsend's Candidate Night, being held here at Townsend's Memorial Hall. I'm John Barrett, sometimes known as your Deputy Moderator, and I'm here to moderate the discussion tonight. Tonight we have 6 candidates, and the way we're going to proceed is each candidate will have an opportunity to give an opening statement up to 3 minutes or so. Then we'll follow with questions and answers. And what I would like to do is probably break that up with the non-selectman candidates doing a question and answer segment first, and then the candidates for selectmen doing a question and answer period. And then followed up after the questions and answers for a short, I guess, closing statement if people want to make a closing statement. So I think I should start out by, I guess, introducing all the candidates. And for Board of Selectmen, they have David Funioli to my immediate right, Carolyn Smart, and Colin McNabb running for Selectman. For Recreation Commissioner, David Shuttler is further over there, followed by Ray Boyes running for the Parks and Cemetery Board, and Peter Buxton running for the Trustees for Soldier Memorial non-veteran position. So before we get started, I just would like to thank Neshoba Publishing for sponsoring this and for Channel 9's participation and sponsorship of this event. It's important, I think, for all of us in a democracy such as a small-town democracy for people to get to know the people that are running for office and taking the time to come out and run for office and do their public service. So I would, most of all, I guess, like to thank the candidates for coming out tonight, and also thank all of you for coming out to hear from the candidates. So we did not do a toss or anything, so if the candidates don't mind, what I would do is just ask Mr. Funioli to start, unless there's an objection, with their opening statement. And I'm going to try to time it. If I lose track, let me know if anyone goes too long. All right, David?
I'll make it brief, I promise. Thank you for coming tonight, everyone. It's good to see that we've got somewhat of a turnout, and I'm running for selectman. Some of you may recognize me from before. I finished out a 1-year term as selectman when a previous selectman had to leave early. I enjoyed the job. It was challenging at times, and it was fun at other times, but like any other job, you've got to pay attention to it and you've got to do the job. I'm going to keep it short and sweet and turn the mic over to the next candidate. Okay,
Carolyn Smart.
Hi, folks. My name is Carolyn Smart, and I'm running for the Board of Selectmen. Before I go on to my speech that I wanted to do tonight, I did want to give a shout out to Stephen Spofford. I guess he came all the way here to spend his 70th birthday with us.
Happy birthday, Stephen.
I appreciate that, Steve. So I began my service to this community back in 1998 on the Planning Board. Then I served the Capital Planning Committee for 7 years, and I've been on the Finance Committee for the last 3 years. I worked for the town as a selectman's secretary for 11 years. During my tenure, I worked under 12 different selectmen and 4 different town administrators. I've even stepped up on 2 occasions to serve as your acting town administrator. I've learned something from everyone I have served under. You, the taxpayer, have invested resources and money in my training, and as a result, I have a wealth of knowledge in areas such as procurement, personnel management, insurance, and municipal finance, just to name a few. One of the greatest lessons I've learned during my service with this town is about respect. The notion that we can disagree without being disagreeable seems to have somehow been lost. That is one area in this town government that I would like to see improvement, and that's with communication and support for our volunteer boards and committees. I'd like to bring back the concept of having board and committee meetings every few months. In the past, it's proven helpful to understand and identify areas and needs of the town. Too many times I've seen past selectmen become defensive or take personally when a voter or employee criticizes a decision or complains about a process. While you can't make everyone happy, realizing that everyone comes to a situation with their own set of experiences and they deserve as a matter of right to have a voice and be treated with respect. Another area I feel that needs improvement is with our fiscal planning and budgeting. Townsend historically has been in reactionary mode. I'd like to be in a more proactive mode. We've not grown in size and we have not significantly grown in revenue, but our expenses are continuing to grow at a rapid pace. That is something that must be tackled. Being fiscally responsible and accountable must be our first priority. We cannot continue with the same philosophy of the last few years. Well, we'll just continue to ask the taxpayers for more. We must manage the resources we have in a way that allows for an increase in expenses without being in crisis. This type of management only brings forth distrust and discontent. We must have projections, long-range planning, and stop reacting prematurely with threats of layoffs and loss of services. I hope you'll consider voting for me in the upcoming election on April 30th. I feel my training can be considered an asset to this town. Thank you.
Good job. Just in case anybody does go over 3 minutes, the way I've got this set up is an old car horn will sound on my cell phone, so just to warn you, okay?
Might go off.
So you made it, Carolyn. All right, Colin.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Colin McNabb. I was born and raised in this wonderful town, and I'm a candidate for selectman. I graduated college from the University of Vermont with a bachelor's degree in political science and history. I'm a member of the board of directors for the Townsend Business Association, serving as the association's president last year. I'm a parishioner of St. John's Church here in town, where I serve on the parish council, as well as serving as a Eucharistic minister and confirmation teacher. I'm also a member of the Knights of Columbus. In regards to serving the town of Townsend, I'm a member of the Capital Planning Committee, currently serving as the vice chair. I'm also a member of the Finance Committee and the Town Democratic Committee. I'm running for this office simply because I'm passionate about the town of Townsend. I see this as an avenue to give back to the community I so dearly love. We have such a special community here in Townsend. We are far from average or ordinary. This community is extraordinary. Through fiscal prudence and good flow of communication with our other boards and committees, I believe that I would be the best candidate to fill the position on the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Colin.
Wow.
All right. Let's see. I'm sorry. David.
Yes. That was pretty serious stuff. I'll try to lighten the mood a little bit for the Recreation Commission. I'm Dave Shelter. I'm running for Recreation Commissioner, and I've been kind of involved in recreation for the past 5 or 6 years. I was part of the Destination Imagination program, acting as the coordinator here in the town of Townsend. And this past year, I've been serving as the president of the Townsend Recreation Activity Council. It's not all that well known, but we do some stuff for the town. And I remember we had a conversation once, and we were looking at logos, and we were like, what is recreation? And it's like, it's such a vague term. Anything that entertains you is kind of recreation. So, and I've seen recreation be more and more dynamic over the past few years. We've got a new library, or fairly new library. We've got a green across from the library. We've got new tennis courts. And I think we have a very dynamic environment to create, you know, a lot of different fun stuff to do. So I would appreciate your vote on Election Day. Thank you.
All right. Then thank you, Dave. All right, Ray.
Hi, my name is Raymond Boyes. I'm running for re-election on the Cemetery and Parks Commission. The reason I ran for it the first time was that I worked for the Cemetery and Parks Department for half a dozen years and enjoyed it so much I thought I'd run for commissioner. And I don't know how many terms, what term this is that I'm running for, but I've been there for a while, and I'd like to continue to stay there and work. The Christian lot in West Townsend was purchased when I was working for the Cemetery and Parks Department, and we are finally just getting it ready to use for cemeteries. So it took quite a while to do that, but hopefully things will get moving better than they have been in the past. And I hope you'll all re-elect me so I can continue to see this job through, and a few other projects we have that we're working on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ray. And Peter?
How you doing? My name is Pete Buxton. I've lived here in town since 1969. And about 3 years ago, I was riding around town looking at the soldiers' memorials. And they looked pretty good, but they also looked like they needed some repairs. So I went and talked to Sue Funioli and asked her what I could do, and she suggested that I run for the empty seat that was on the committee, and that's what I did. And I was elected. I met with the committee, and I went around and I painted all the posts and started cleaning up the grounds around them and everything. In the process, we came on a situation where we're making a room downstairs here in the town hall as a memorial room for the veterans that were killed in action. And there will be a plaque on the wall with all information about the vet, and hopefully we can find some pictures of all the vets that have died in this town. I've been getting a lot of information from different websites and everything, finding out about the vets, who they were, what family members are around, and all that and everything. In that process, I have found an additional vet that is not even honored in this town, but he is assigned to this town. So we've got to do something about that vet. So the job is not done, and I'd appreciate your vote to continue on with the work that I've been doing with the committee and trying to get this cleaned up and the room set up downstairs. So anybody who wants to know what happened to the people in this town and where they're buried and when they got killed in action. So it's just something that I want to continue and finish. And I'm looking forward for your vote.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yeah, that's great. Okay, now I just want to make sure there aren't any other candidates that came in late, are there, out there, that would like to speak, or? Nope? Okay. All right, well, this will open up the question and answer session, and I would like to ask, pretty much we'll run this the way we would at town meeting. Steve, you have a microphone someplace? Okay, and if you can bring it to whoever I recognize, and if the person, when I recognize you, if you can give your name and address and then pose your question to whomever, either a general question or if you have a specific question. I'm going to obviously try to, I don't anticipate any issues, but we're going to maintain the decorum. So if there are any outbursts, I'm going to, as our moderator, Jean Rahala, would insist, we maintain the decorum of the meeting and try to get as much information as we can tonight. So first section will be questions for the non-selectmen candidates. So if anyone has any questions for candidates for the Recreation Commission, Cemetery Parks Commission, or the trustees of Soldier Memorials, please raise your hand. Oh, there's got to be some. Okay. All right. Well, I'll pose one then, I guess, for Mr. Shuttler. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the Recreation Department in Townsend?
The biggest challenge, obviously...
Oh, thank you, Steve.
I would say the biggest challenge, obviously there's the financial challenge. That's always a challenge in town. You got to kind of balance things out. And another thing is for people to really welcome you know, what's happening in town with these new amenities we have, and really try to get back and support everybody.
Okay. Mr. Spofford?
Is this on? Okay. I just want to make this a general statement and question to all three. I am really glad to see people running that want to be in the position for that position's sake and not just to be on a board or committee. And I think all three of those candidates are doing exactly that. Can you understand me, Peter? Can you, can you hear, did you hear what I said?
I even got my hearing aids in and you was talking.
Oh, I was just saying you're a wonderful guy. I think you're doing a great job. And I know your wife's going to kill me if I say anything else. And Ray is dedicated to his job, and Dave is new blood. We need new blood in a lot of the boards in this town, because you'll notice that by the empty spots on the ballot when you go to vote. You'll notice there are places that are open, and I hope other people will step forward and be on the board. By the way, I was a recreation commissioner for a couple of years myself, Dave. And don't miss a meeting, because I got elected chairman when I did that once. So don't.
All right, thank you. Mr. Spofford? I see the cemetery superintendent at the back of the hall. Mr. Raposa, this is your chance to ask one of your bosses a question. You're good? Okay. All right. Well, I think, Pete, you pretty much laid out, oh, all right, Mr. Funioli, you have a question?
Sure. I was going to ask Pete.
Oh, use the mic, please.
I was going to ask Pete what kind of resources he has available, because he was a little more generous than I'll be. Some of the soldiers' memorials on some of these corners look absolutely terrible, and they do need to be cleaned up, fixed up, and given the proper care and respect. Do you have any resources available, or is this something we're going to need to?
We're there. We have families that are in the vicinity of the soldiers' memorials that are taking care of the lots as they get deteriorated. They put the flowers in, they rake the area, they clean it up. But we paint the posts and all that to make them, and we put out the wreaths and Memorial Day weekend. We make sure they're up and on. But basically, the flowers or anything dressing around the memorials are handled by a family close to or a member of the deceased soldier. It depends on what we can find. So we've assigned them. In fact, I handle 2 of them right now up in West Townsend. So I take care of them in the summertime. Resources, we do have some money, but I don't know the quantity of it because it's never been mentioned, but I know there is some money. Bob Tumba has mentioned it a couple of times. So.
Okay.
Pete, Brian Sanford, you know me. How many soldiers' memorials do we have around town, other than the one on the Common? That's the only one I know of. Where are they?
There are 17 soldiers' memorials in town. They are all over different areas. There's out on Pierce Road, there's one. There's 2 up on New Fitchburg Road and Sauna Road up in Vinton Pond area. There is, I think, 3 along Dudley Road. And then there's 2, 1, 2, 3, about 5 right on Main Street, maybe 6.
Are they all stone monuments with writing on them?
No, they're just a post with the metal sign up top. Anyway. But what we're doing is with the memorial room downstairs, nobody knows who these people are. We want them to know who these people are. And if they want to go out, there will be a map there to show where all the memorials are assigned.
Well, that's interesting. It's the first I've known we had that many memorials around town.
Yes.
And I've been here 35 years.
And that does not include the star out front here in the front of the hall or the big one down here on the center of town on the Common. They're separate.
Okay. Mr. Spofford.
I was kind of surprised at that, Brian, but all those memorials were put up supposedly in a square, because my cousin is one on Worcester Road.
Correct.
And you're right, most people don't know where these memorials are. They're just like a sign for your street sign almost. It's black, it's got a sign on top with gold lettering for the person that has died, passed away. And he's got the idea, because most people don't know where they are. And I think it'd be benefit to do that downstairs in that room, like you were saying, Peter. I think it's a good idea to recognize some people who have done some service to our country and our town. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Cloutier.
Here, I'll put in a shameless plug for the Townsend Community Couples Club. We also help maintain the memorial sites. How many did we do last year? Like 10? We raised our own money and actually went out, and it was a sweat equity project for us to keep these memorials in shape, because we really believe in them. So that project we will be doing again this spring, once spring really gets here. And anybody who wants to help us or join the Couples Club, you can contact me. So this is my shameless plug.
You'll get the bill at the end of the month. Okay. I do have one question that was sent to me, and as a citizen asked that I ask it. It's to all the candidates, so I'll take this point now to pose this question, which is asked on behalf of Jack Stonefield of 137 Warren Road. I'll just state it. He says, as I will have to be out of town on the day of the candidates' night, I would like to ask you, as moderator of the night, that the following question be asked of all the candidates. And this is it. While I know there will always be disagreements and differences of opinions, I have observed that over the past few years, some tension and discord between the boards, commissions, and committees of the town. I would therefore like to ask what each of you would do, if elected, to promote cooperation and harmony within the town of Townsend. And I guess I would ask Pete if you could comment on that first. We'll go down the row.
You're asking me what, as a committee member, what I would do to work with the rest of the boards in the town?
Right.
Yes, that is a definite. This is the town of Townsend. We've been a town for a long time, and we should work together. It should not be, this is my part, and leave it alone, and don't tell anybody else. You got to share everything that you can do that you work with. I've seen it before. You're a team. Everybody's elected to a team, and the selectmen run the team, and that's the way it should be, and work together.
Well said. Right?
Well, I guess I have to pretty much agree with him. He just about hit the nail on the head on that one, as far as everybody working together and seeing what we can do to help each other out and get the job done for everybody concerned.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ray. David?
I've always been a big advocate for debate and argument, but I think people do need to put their personal agendas aside and really look at what's best for the town.
Okay, thank you. Colin?
Just to reiterate what I said in my opening statement, I think it's just about good flow of communication, talking to the different boards and committees, and through that I think that any personal differences or anything of that nature can be solved quite quickly.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Carolyn?
I as well had addressed that in my original speech, and I believe, we can disagree without being disagreeable. We need to disagree. We need to think differently. That's how we're going to solve our problems. So like I said in my speech, I would bring back all board and committee meetings. We used to have them 5 or 6 years ago. They were great for communication and speech. We were able to identify areas that we could be of assistance, and that's really what it is, just getting the communication and working together with each other.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. David?
Well, it's going to be hard to add to that because we are all in agreement on the same point. Basically, we as a town have to take care of ourselves first and foremost. There's plenty of things going on down in Boston, the State House, et cetera, that they seem to take from us and then take advantage of us. And if we're busy fighting and squabbling amongst each other on the boards, we're not going to be able to get together and pull all in the same direction. And I believe Boston enjoys it that way, because if they don't have to talk to us, they don't have to hear from us, they can spend our money whatever way they want, and then we have to fight for ourselves amongst ourselves. We have to start pulling together as a town. Personal differences aside, we all agree on that, and we do need to do something about it. Things are just going to keep increasing in cost, in expense, and unless you want to see your taxes just keep climbing and climbing and climbing till you can't even afford to live here anymore, then we need to act together.
Okay. Thank you, David. Okay. One more call for any questions for the non-selectmen candidates. And there being none, I guess you folks can stay up here if you'd like, or take a seat in the audience, whatever you want to do. And I think that you're going to... come on, no one's got any tomatoes out there. Okay. Again, thank you, gentlemen, for your volunteerism and willingness to serve the town. Okay. All right, so we have our candidates for the Board of Selectmen. Does anyone have any questions for them? Sir? Yeah, you do, because it's being taped for Channel 9.
Ray Balboni. I live in Timberley Park on Oak Circle. Been here about 32 years. My wife and I came up here from Maryland. We're still here, so we still like this town. My question is to each of these candidates. Now, I've heard on the first question that you mentioned here about getting along, we have a nice love fest that's going on here right now. I don't know how long that's going to last, because, you know, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But the question I would ask to each of these candidates, and I thank them for their opening statements, would be, what would you bring to this job? What special talent, okay, would you bring to this job? Your greatest asset, and what do you think also would be your greatest liability? You can start with the gentleman here on my right and just go across. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Funioli?
Well, good question. Like I said in my short, brief opening statement, I've sat in the selectman's chair before, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but it did give me some insight and some experience on exactly what does go on up front here in public and behind the scenes, and basically just my experience doing that. Plus, I've also served on other boards. I'm not a newcomer. I've been a trust fund commissioner. I've been on the zoning board of appeals. I've been on the properties committee, stretching all the way back to just around 1998, 1999. So I've learned a lot about this town hall, the people in it, how all the departments are supposed to work. And like you said, we've got a love fest going here, and good intentions are always there, but we really do have to work on trying to get as much talent into these different committees and boards, and then getting them all to work together for the common good of this town. So I would have to say my greatest gift that I can give to you would be is I've done this before, however, only for a year, but I'd like to try it for a full term, and I think I can do well at it. My greatest liability is I'm here with the rest of you, and I haven't participated enough in the past, and I think we all need to participate as much as possible. Time is short. We all have busy personal lives, but we all have to encourage each other to step up and do what we can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Funioli. Smart?
That is a good question. And I spent some time thinking about some of the things that we can do to improve communications and how people can relate to each other and understandings. And I actually reached out to both the candidates, and we met last week, and we had a conversation about much that very same thing. And one of the things that we can do is promote ourselves and not tear each other down, and we've all agreed to do that. So I think that's one of my strengths, this consensus building. I learned a lot from our former town administrator, Greg Barnes. He was real good at consensus building, but it was one-on-one. I think we need to do it more group on group and educate people of things. A lot of times it's misinformation that people don't understand. If you were going to ask my family what my liability would be, it would be my mouth. But I mean, sometimes I am kind of strong without thinking who's around me, so that's something I need to be more careful about, especially in the position of a selectman. You don't want to needlessly hurt somebody's feelings. You want to build them up so we can all succeed.
Thank you. Mr. McNabb?
So, I think as my greatest strength would be probably my wanting to get involved and to help the community, and just the fact that, you know, I grew up in this town and I love it so much and I want to do as much good as I possibly can. And probably I would say my biggest liability is that I want to get involved in everything and I want to help everybody, and you know, you can only do so much. Which is why I already had planned, and several of my family members have recommended that I give up a few of the things I do if I am elected to this position, because I want it to be my main focus.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? All right. Mr. Plomaden, then you, sir.
Hi, this question is for Carolyn Smart. Do you consider yourself an advocate for the West Townsend Reading Room, and if so, how?
I don't consider myself an advocate for any particular department. I do help the girls on the West Townsend Reading Room Committee as a main point of contact. I just do it to be nice, to help them. I'm an advocate of all the town departments.
Okay. Gentlemen, over right there. Oh, okay, Jim. Didn't recognize you.
Obviously not high tech. Jim LaQuia, 171 Fitchburg Road, Townsend. Born in Townsend, lived in Lynbrook while back in Townsend 13 years. A question I have for the three of you is we recently went through some situations within our town hall and other budding bodies where there was a freeze put on everybody's salary. We made major cuts. We told people they couldn't advance financially. And I want to know what you have to share with us as far as where we're going to go with equal rights and treating people fairly within town employment.
Okay, I think that's a question for all the candidates. Why don't we start? Colin?
When it comes to salaries and wages, you know, employees of the town tend to get very passionate about it, which I understand because, you know, it affects them directly. But I think that just simply by, you know, having good human resources, so to speak, making sure that everyone's doing the correct job they need to, and they're being, you know, either rewarded or not rewarded depending on whether they deserve it. I think that, you know, I'm very much in favor of meritocracy, and you get the fair wage for the job that you do.
Okay, Carolyn?
Well, this is a tough question because personnel and pay issues has been an ongoing problem for Townsend for as long as I've been involved. And I think it just goes back to respect. When an employee has a complaint or a concern or they don't feel like they're being treated fairly, you know, as I said before, I think sometimes the town administrator or even the selectmen become defensive or take it personally, where they're just advocating for themselves. So being more respectful, sticking to the plan, having the same rules for everybody. What dictates your level of responsibility is the pay you get. A secretary will get $20,000, a department head 100,000. But the rules should be the same, the benefits should be the same, and that creates a more level playing field, and people don't feel so, it doesn't cause less, morale to go down. I think that's about all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fanioli.
Okay, I'm not sure if you were referring to something in particular, but it's an imperfect analogy. The town should be run pretty much like a corporation. You've got the Board of Selectmen at the top, you've got your town administrator who might be looked at as the CEO, the selectmen and the Board of Directors, you've got your department heads. If there's a problem where somebody perceives that they've been treated unfairly or they're underpaid or their job classification is incorrect, then they need to bring it through the chain of command. If they don't get satisfaction from their department head, bring it to the CEO. If you don't think the CEO's done a proper handling of the scenario, then bring it to the selectmen. They have their meetings Tuesday night, and you can ask to be put on the agenda for the night, and things can be discussed out in the open where they should be. Transparency should be the rule, not the exception.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Thalheimer.
All right. My question, and of course, I've always found education to be an important quality, especially in our elected leaders and community members. My question for all selectmen candidates, and Colin touched on it just a little bit, is the extent of your education. Of course, where and when you went to high school, when you graduated, college, that sort of thing, because not a lot of that's been written in the paper, and I'm just curious.
Okay, I think the question is for all the candidates a little bit more on your background and experience.
Education?
Education.
Okay. Like I said, I've lived in this town for most of my life. I graduated from North Middlesex in 1998, and I graduated from the University of Vermont in 2002. And Hawthorne Brook.
I also went to North Middlesex Regional, and I did not graduate from college. I actually went through a training program in upstate New York to become a paralegal.
Well, unfortunately, I'm old enough. There was no Hawthorne Brook for me to graduate from. I've lived in Townsend my entire life. Spalding Memorial School, then North Middlesex. I graduated in 1975. Served some time in the Navy where I received some education and certification in electronics from there. After the Navy, I ended up getting an associate's degree from Mount Wachusett Community College for computer information systems, and then a bachelor's degree from Fitchburg State in technically business administration, but my concentration was management information systems, which is computer systems, overseeing the use, programming, software, et cetera, everything to involve yourself with that. And I've received maybe a half a dozen other certificates from companies for various assorted things like robotics and different programming languages.
Okay, thank you. I think I saw Ms. Sellers. Did you have your hand up?
I'm interested in some specifics about this making working better as a town as a whole. I mean, I heard a lot of a love fest up there, and I heard let's have some meetings, but I didn't hear anything more about that, and I'd like you each to talk a little more about that, not just for town boards, but the people in the town meeting audience, and also for the people who don't come to town meeting, don't come out to vote. How do you expect to, how do we get all of us working together as a town?
All right, Carolyn, go first, if you would.
Sure. Well, Carolyn, as I outlined, I'd like to bring back the concept of all board and committee meetings. We did that, like I said, several years ago, and every couple of months on a Saturday morning, at least one representative from all the boards and committees come in. It would basically be a venting session. But you learned a lot, and people were able to communicate, and sometimes the personal touch is really what works. I think that's probably the best way to start it. Now, to reach out to the community and get them more involved, that's always been a struggle for Townsend. And I know I just recently attended a session over at the library, Intro to Town Government, to try and get people involved. And unfortunately, nobody showed up. So I guess we would just continue on. I know the library is a valuable resource in getting people involved, and just try and get people involved that way.
Thank you. Colin?
I think that, as I stated in my opening, that good flow of communication is always key, but actually implementing can sometimes be a little more difficult. I think that, one of the great things that we've had in this town recently is a new website, which has I've spoken to some people, and it has the ability to, put minutes, put agendas, put the business of the committee on the individual pages. I think that that is definitely a way that we can spread the word and open up all the, whatever information needs to be disseminated to the residents of Townsend.
Thank you. David?
I've been approached by several people by way of the internet. I've got a Facebook page for my campaign, and I posed some questions on it. One of the things that several people mentioned was that, number one, they don't have cable TV, so they can't see what we're doing tonight, and they don't see town meetings. They don't like buying the local newspapers, and basically, one of them said, we don't even know when town meetings or when these events are. So besides using all the new high-tech gimmickry that's out there, we've got to get back to the old-fashioned method of knocking on doors, maybe, putting signs out, and doing a better job of notifying our citizens that these events are going to happen, and don't just rely on the fact that those of us that have a technology background, or your kids who know everything about computers, are going to be the source of your information on functioning in this town. I'm not really sure we all agree on that, though, that we do need to have more participation, but how do we get the greater community to become more involved? We have to get in front of them and let them know these things are happening and you need to participate.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Spofford, I saw your hand first, but...
You guys are all running for one seat on the Board of Selectmen. There are 3 members of that board, and how well do you think each of you will fit into the puzzle of our selectmen? Do you think you'll get along with them, or be antagonistic, or do you have an agenda, or are we going to try to fight for the greater good of Townsend? Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Collin?
I'm a pretty easy person to get along with. I get along with most people, and for me, the most important thing is to try and build some sort of consensus amongst any board or committee. My experience on the different groups, committees, boards, what have you, has been to come to some compromise that is going to be for the best interests of whatever entity it is, whether it be the town, or my work with the church, or my work in the business community in Townsend.
Thanks, Steve. I don't foresee any problems with work. I work on a finance committee with 7 different members, and we all are different personalities. I work on the capital planning committee with 7 different members, and we're all different personalities. With that said, we do need to have compromise, but it doesn't mean we should just all go along with like think either. I think good discussion and good debate is how we get the best answers. So you can do it professionally and you can do it reasonably without arguments or bad feelings, but I think ideas do need to be discussed. I don't see a problem with me working with the current Board of Selectmen.
Thank you. David?
Well, I can point to my past record. I served on the Board of Selectmen with Bob Plamondon, and there's been a few times where him and I have not seen eye to eye on things, but it never got nasty, ugly, or heated. Nick Tallheimer, I've known him almost his entire life. We've grown up in the same neighborhood. No problems with him at all. And Sue Lizio, I barely know her a little bit, but she seems to be a nice enough person. I don't think she's going to kick me in the butt too hard. But having held the seat before, I can vouch for myself that it's a cooperative process. It can get testy at times, but at the end of the day, we've all shaken hands and gone our separate ways and just agreed to disagree at times, and that's the way it should be.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Balboni? Ray Balboni. Hold on a minute, sir, for the mic.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of talk about cooperation and compromise, and that's really the only way you're going to get things done. I know there's a lot of contentious issues when it comes to the schools and the fire department, the police department, the town hall, but you're going to have to work those out amongst yourselves. And when you ask about, people getting involved, okay, my experience over the years has been this. People come in and they vote on something. It's brought up again and again and again. And people have lives still, they get tired of it, and they don't show up. The reason you don't get participation, okay, a lot of people are thinking, well, you didn't get what you wanted the first time, so you're going to keep bringing it up until you get what you want. And they just drop off and say, well, we'll just let it be run by the few people that want to run the town. That, I think, is your biggest obstacle. And the other thing I said, when you're talking about working, together, you're right on with this, but they have to do this between these departments. Everybody's going to fight for a piece of the pie, and a lot of times, they're not going to pay attention to the other person. I took a lot of issue with the school using their children as pawns in a money game here for this override. That, I think, is despicable. You got an issue that you want to bring in front of the people. Don't use these young kids, okay, as your, talking points, okay, when they're not really into this whole thing. That's my point, and I think that's what I think you have to do in order to make it work. And that's it. I don't comment. You can comment. That's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
What the question is, Ray?
The question is, what do you plan to do, okay, to get people involved, okay, with these issues when in the past they've been brought up time and time again and people just stop coming? How are you going to get these people involved? That's the first question. And how are you going to work with these departments, okay, not acrimoniously, in a way that everybody benefits, police, fire, schools, not just for that one particular issue? That, I think, is the job. That's going to be a tough job, I think, for selectmen.
Okay.
That's my point. Thank you.
Got it. I guess, David, you want to start?
I grabbed the mic. We're going to have to split part of that apart. I think part of, obviously, the anger that a lot of townspeople had about the way things were conducted involving the school budget and the multiple revisitation of the override propositions and stuff. Part of that is there is an established process where the school board does their thing, they create their budget, they bring it to the town. If you vote it down and say, no, we don't want it, they have to go back, reformulate it, and bring it again. That is a mandatory process. Eventually, it should be resolved. The third time, from what I saw this last time, the override didn't occur. The town voted it down, but because Ashby and Pepperell are part of the equation, they did vote for their parts of the override. We had to come up with the money out of our own pocket. The reason why it kept getting revisited is because that is how that particular budget process has to occur. If all three towns, or 2 out of 3, had turned it down that third time, it actually would have gone into the hands of the state for final determination, pretty much like what they do now, where every year they announce, you, Pepperell, are going to pay this much, towns in your evaluations this much, Ashby, you're going to do that. So on one hand, it behooves us as a town to get together and try to agree on it. Tactics like what you described, if some people feel that holding a child up and saying you're just trying to hurt my kid, that's an emotional argument. If you can see past that long enough to the point, that people feel strongly about what they want. Sometimes getting them to compromise is a tough thing, and that's where, again, my scenario or my analogy about it being a corporation. The CEO and the chairman of the board and the board of directors, the selectman, the town administrator, are going to have to take a hard stand and say yes, no, or maybe, depending on what's happening. But yes, you're right, that whole thing turned a lot of people off on both sides of the question, and it wasn't a tactic where people were trying to wear the other side down. That's how that budget process usually has to go in order to get to a final conclusion. Other budgetary issues we can handle directly by ourselves in between boards. And again, going to the question of how do you make somebody cooperate, well, that might be like squeezing Jell-O. The harder you squeeze, the worse the situation gets. So it's going to be tricky for any one of us three, as well as anybody else that's in a position on these boards. How do you get your fellow citizens to cooperate for their own good, but also for everyone's good, not just their own?
Okay, thank you. Carolyn?
I'm not a fan of fear politics myself. And as I said before, you can't take everything personally. And we tend to do that because we're human. So if a group comes in and we're feeling pressured, it's human to kind of pull back. But as a selectman, you need to rise above that. You need to understand that people passionately believe in what they're saying and give that respect. However, I agree that after the second time, because Dave is right, that was mandatory by the school, I don't think we should have gone for a third. I believe the taxpayers said it loud enough. This goes along with financial planning. That takes a lot of the pressure and stress out of these situations and a lot of the emotion out of the situation. People need to feel safe and secure. They need a concrete plan, and we all need to know what mission we're on so we can work together.
Thank you. Colin?
That was well stated about the school, the issues of the schools, and the way the system works, and the way the budgetary process works with the schools and the towns and all that sort of thing. I think that if we're fiscally conservative, then maybe it wouldn't have been such an issue. You know, we wouldn't have had to do the go for the second time for the 2.5 override and that sort of thing. I think that if we just do some conservative budgeting, then we will have the ability to work these challenges into the current budget.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, this question is directed to Carolyn Smart. Carolyn, I know you've been mired in politics in town for about 11, 12 years, maybe longer. You work for the town departments. You're on many town boards, and I know how frustrating it can be to be on the opposite side of maybe administration or selectmen on your opinions and what have you. You currently work for the water department, am I correct?
Yes.
Now, as a water department employee and as a selectman, how would you deal with the issues that come before the Board of Selectmen that is submitted by the water department every fiscal year? You would have to refrain from any opinion, I would assume, on any water department issues. Is that correct?
Well, the water department's a little different. They operate under an enterprise fund in accordance with their acts, so there wouldn't be a lot that would come forward, but absolutely I would recuse myself. The State Ethics Commission determined that you would only need to do it if it benefited you. So
that's what I'm thinking. You're an employee, so you got to be careful if anything that comes before the board that would benefit you personally as a water department.
Absolutely. And the same as while I'm on the Finance Committee, and I've done that throughout my service to towns and
because they come before the board for their recommendations, a favorable recommendation or not favorable recommendation on whatever articles come before them. And in certain cases, you would have to recuse yourself. That would make the board ineffective in the event that there's a tie vote. Am I correct?
It could possibly, but I can't imagine a situation when that would occur. When you're talking about procurement, which is the Board of Selectmen have to sign off on all contracts, that wouldn't benefit me directly because we're buying meters and things like that. As far as benefits or health insurance or pay, it applies to the whole. It doesn't apply to me, but I would recuse myself out of respect because I wouldn't want people to think that I am.
Would you, as a selectman, consider, if you were elected selectman, consider looking for other employment, or you plan on staying?
Yes, I would. Actually, I'm in the planning stages with my future daughter-in-law. We're opening a cafe, so it might not be an issue after I'm elected.
That's what I'm trying to find out.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. I think, Carol, I'm sorry, Jim, you had your hand up, I think. So, Mr. Leclerc?
Thank you, Chairman. Comment, first of all, running for selectman in the town of Townsend is a serious responsibility for all, and I don't think anybody should ever admit to being kicked in the butt by another selectman. So we got to make sure that it's a positive attitude. My next question is going to be to the three of you. As far as the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen, who's boss?
The Board of Selectmen.
It's concise. Carolyn?
Our charter outlines the responsibility of each, and it is the Board of Selectmen.
Well, I guess I'll talk a little bit more than these two on that, just a little bit more, though. The town administrator's position is to run the town on a day-to-day basis. He is basically the top of the chain. Again, my analogy of a corporation or a company. The Board of Selectmen are the ultimate authority in the town. They have direct control over the town administrator, but on a day-to-day basis, he runs this town. Some people have likened it to being a fourth selectman. That's not quite accurate because there's plenty that he cannot say or do that only the selectmen can. Basically, again, like the company ladder we were talking about, if anybody has a problem with the town administrator, they're more than welcome to go to the Board of Selectmen, make their concerns known, and it can be discussed with them. As far as employee involvement, again, I'm a big believer in a chain of command. I was in the military and I've been in corporate situations before. You have to walk it up through the layers. Even if you know you're not going to get what you want from a department head or from your town administrator, it's only a courtesy and shows due respect that you air your grievance with that person, and if you don't get what you want or don't like the answer you get, you go up to the next level. Ultimately, the Board of Selectmen, not the town administrator, but he is very, very important in the daily runnings of this town.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sellers?
This might be a little bit related to that, talking about a corporation. Town government's a little bit different because there are other boards who are also elected directly by the voters. So I would like to hear each of you describe how you may treat a board that's elected by the voters, their decisions, their procurement decisions, their employment decisions that come before you, that, you know, the Board of Health, the library, the planning board, versus appointed boards that the selectmen appointed.
Okay. I'll start again only because my mouth is still running in neutral here.
And you've got the mic.
And I've got the mic. Basically, even though the Board of Selectmen are at the top of the food chain, they're an elected board. Any other board in this town that is elected directly by the people. The selectmen don't have primacy over any other board. No elected board can overrule the decisions of another board. Cooperation to make sure we're all on the same page, so a board other than the selectmen may want to try and do something that's not going to work. Get together, talk to them, get town council involved. The Board of Selectmen are kind of like the steering committee, as it were. We can't the Board of Selectmen can't order another elected board to say or do anything that their membership hasn't voted up or down. Appointed boards can be slightly different. It depends on who's appointing them. The selectmen are the ultimate appointing authority in town. There's been cases in the past where different members of different elected boards have had to step down or left or illness for whatever reason. Usually what they do is, according to the charter and Mass General Law, is they have a certain amount of time to put forward a candidate of their choosing for the selectmen to appoint to fill that position on their board. Customarily, the selectmen will accede to the wishes of that board. We're not going to appoint somebody that that board doesn't want in that position just to try and show our power and influence. And I don't think I've ever heard of that happening in Townsend, where another elected board has had an opening that the selectmen put somebody in place just to spite that group. I don't believe it's ever happened.
Thank you. Carolyn?
With things like contracts and stuff like that with the elected boards, the reason the selectmen sign off on them is to make sure all the process is following correctly so that no other elected appointed boards are exposing us to liability and they're following all the rules. So that's really what the Board of Selectmen does. I don't believe in getting involved in their business. They know their business best. Library trustees know library business. I have enough on my plate. I feel I'm more there to support and make sure everything's being done correctly, or the town administrator really is, but the Board of Selectmen supports that. So as far as appointed boards, honestly, again, I wouldn't get involved in their good work. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, finding out what's the best for the town. If an appointed board, and I'll use Capital, for example, we seem to go back and forth on Capital. Capital has a process they followed. They have policies in place. Before they put their policies in place, we met with the boards of selectmen and finance committee, and we got everybody on the same table, and now the policy is in place. So as we follow our process, now the selectmen may not be happy with the outcome. To me, the committee has done its good work and followed its policy, and that's really all that the Board of Selectmen needs to be involved with.
Thank you. Colin?
With any committee or board, whether it be appointed, elected, I think that it's important that the Board of Selectmen show them the proper respect, but also the other boards and committees understand that they are the executive of the town, that they are charged with that role. However, I think that with anything, consensus can be built.
Okay, Ms. Lizio.
Can I get a twofer?
Say again?
I'd like a twofer.
Twofer?
A twofer. First question is, what's your interpretation of, or what's your definition for the term recuse? What does that mean in terms of what you can or cannot do? And the second thing that I'd ask is, what is your interpretation of the charter where it calls for the selectman's job to be non-administrative, not day-to-day?
Okay, yeah, Carolyn? You want
Is that for me, Sue?
I think it's for everyone, right?
All of you? So you want a definition of recusing yourself? I'm sorry. If you're...
I know what I've read and what I would be doing if I were saying I was going to recuse. I want to make sure that you guys all know what that means and that the public here and at home knows what recuse means.
Well, recusing yourself from a discussion and a decision, there's two separate, each situation is rather individual. On the Finance Committee, I've recused myself a few times because you don't want to give the appearance of a conflict. So since I was a part-time employee and I worked on the Finance Committee, if we were voting on pay raises for the whole, under the State Ethics Commission, I could vote on that. I did not vote on that and recuse myself from the conversation because I didn't want to give the appearance to anybody that I was biased. So that would be my definition of recusing yourself, is not to give the appearance that you could be biased, because town government, then you build distrust and people start saying things, and you don't want to give that image out there. And I've already forgot the second part of your question, the definition in the charter.
Yeah, I think the charter provisions that says the selectmen are more...
The selectmen do not get involved in the day-to-day business.
yeah.
They set policy, and the town administrator administers the policy.
Okay, David, well, Colin?
Well, recuse is a pretty easy one. It's probably the easiest part of the question. You know, the state ethics is that if you have financial gain, you step aside. However, you know, like Carolyn said, on several occasions I've recused myself just because I didn't feel like it was right. I didn't want to give the impression that I was biased. And in regards to the second part of the question, the board is the overall authority. However, the day-to-day running of the town is charged with the town administrator.
Okay, thank you. David?
Okay, I'll cover it in reverse, like the other two have said, and I said it originally a few minutes ago. The day-to-day operations and running of this town is in the hands of the town administrator. That was the poor analogy I made of almost being a fourth selectman. On the day-to-day basis, he's got his chores, duties, responsibilities, and ultimately he's answerable to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen on a day-to-day basis, well, that's why we get paid $1. They'd prefer us to stay out of the day-to-day business, so we're a little bit elevated above the everyday fray in case there is a situation where the town administrator and an employee or a group don't see eye to eye. We can act as a judgment panel, and if we have to, override the town administrator or support the town administrator depending on the situation. As far as terminology for recusing yourself, it's well laid out in case law, federal level, state level, and town level, that if there's anything that you're going to directly benefit in, you shouldn't even participate in the conversation, probably shouldn't even be in the room. As it was pointed out, the perception of possible wrongdoing should be your guide. If anybody could think badly of your decision to participate in a discussion or a vote, you should recuse yourself immediately and totally from the proceedings. As a selectman, I think I had to do that once in the 1 year that I was on. On the Zoning Board of Appeals, I think I had to recuse myself twice. And I will admit to one instance where I was warned by town council that an appearance of wrongdoing had been brought up. At the time, I was a newspaper reporter, but I was also sitting on the zoning board, and I wrote an article, edited an article for the paper, and I was told that even though it was somebody else's work, just the fact that I touched it and edited it caused a conflict of interest. Not a serious one, but if it had happened again, I needed to recuse myself immediately involving that scenario. So it's easiest to think of it as if there's even the slightest whiff that it may not be kosher, get up and recuse yourself from the proceedings and/or any votes involved with it.
Okay. All right, Mr. LeQuire.
This is becoming extremely interesting this evening with this candidates tonight. I asked a question earlier, who was the boss? The town administrator or the selectmen? We have just been informed that elected bodies and boards that are elected by the citizens of Townsend have their own jurisdiction over their own board. And yet the Board of Health can't get the promotion necessary for their own secretary because the administrator is stopping us and telling us we have to go to the selectmen. How would the three of you handle that one?
Do I want to go first?
Go ahead, Carolyn.
That would be an appeal to the Board of Selectmen, because they're in charge of the reclassification. Our personnel bylaws and policies and procedures need a lot of work. That's one of the first things that I would work on, is I would pull human resource professionals from the town and form a committee and find out what direction we should go on. There's several town models that can work. In 2004, when we were having the all board and committee meetings, we wrote a set of policies and procedures. We met every Saturday. It was about a year process, and we decided instead of trying to have a bylaw, we'd have all the elected boards sign off on it, and this would be our model. That's become gray. Sometimes it's followed, sometimes it's not followed. So we definitely need a study group on how we want to proceed with personnel matters. I don't think it's necessarily fair that your secretary has to go on TV at 7 o'clock to be reclassified. However, there's transparency involved. So maybe it's time to consider a human resource professional or a personnel board, but it's something that needs to be looked at. We need to know where we've been before we can know where we're going, and we've tried a lot of different things. So I would definitely bring in people that are a little bit smarter than me than work on that.
I think that what could aid in preventing these issues from coming up again, as Carolyn stated, the having a personnel board. I think it's really important that we have something in the community that is charged with the town employees and any compensation issues or all that, so anything that's involved in the human resources of the town.
Okay, thank you, Colin. David?
Okay, thank you. Well, like I said earlier, Jim, and it still holds true, being an elected board, if you're having a problem or a situation where you can't get something involving your board resolved, you bring it to the person, in this case the town administrator, and get his decision on it. If that decision doesn't suit the needs of your board, ask to be put on the agenda, meet with the selectmen, and it should get hashed out one way or another that way. Walk it up the chain of command.
All right, if this is a follow-up, Jim, I'll let you, but there's some other people.
Right now, I'm hearing two sides of the story, because a few questions back, you said that the elected boards had equal power as the selectmen when it comes to making decisions for their own board. Now I'm still going back to the administrator and having to go to the selectmen to achieve this simple mission.
Correct. I guess the catch-all phrase that will cover that would be is the Board of Selectmen are the ultimate appointing authority in town. If you're asking for something to happen involving an employee of your board, if the town administrator doesn't agree with it and shoots it down, you bring it to the board, and if we see fit, then he can be overridden, because ultimately the Board of Selectmen are the last court of appeal, as it were. So on a day-to-day basis, again, I know it's kind of gray on the edges there. On a day-to-day basis, the town administrator is in charge, but he's not the ultimate authority in charge of the town. That's the Board of Selectmen. So you need to deal with things the way they're set out and ultimately walk it up the chain of command.
Okay, anyone else want to comment further on that?
Board of Selectmen is a political office, which is why I would want to form a committee to look at what the best thing to do for the employees of the town is. I'd feel more comfortable having a human resource or personnel board do this, and the Board of Selectmen would be the final appeal process. As long as the town votes laws to implement, for example, for you, Jim, you're on the Board of Health, if the town says we have a comp and class plan and we have these personnel bylaws, your power as an elected board is clipped, because the town has now implemented rules on the department as a whole. So that's why I think it's really important we spend some time with people that are trained in this profession to really look at what is the best direction for the town to go in with personnel issues.
I think that I'm just, saying again what I stated before is I also agree that we need a personnel board with the that can handle some of the human resources issues and prevent them from getting to the point where it has to go to the court of last appeal.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Clark.
Hi, I'm Ward Clark. I live in 18 School Street. For a number of years, I've watched at a distance the efforts of the folks who are trying to put a rail trail in and connect to the trail in Groton. And I've attended one or two selectmen's meetings where it was discussed. It isn't clear to me what the role of the Board of Selectmen is in this effort. And so I'd like to hear what the candidates have to say about their involvement in the rail trail effort.
All right, David?
There's one critical part of that, and I believe the current Board of Selectmen made a decision on that. In order for any rail trail development to occur, a lease has to be basically requested by the town, by the Board of Selectmen from the MBTA, gone over. If we sign it, then basically the town is taking on the responsibility of leasing or renting that trail bed and all its liabilities and assets from the MBTA. Again, like I say, I'm not sure if that happened. I thought that I had heard that the Board of Selectmen requested that lease agreement from the MBTA on behalf of the Rail Trail Group and the Department of Recreation from the state level, with the intent of that state body filling in for the town as the responsible party for it. If that's the case, then let's see what happens with it. But as far as I'm concerned, on a personal level, I'm not in favor of that rail trail happening. It, in my opinion, would be too disruptive to several businesses down in the harbor. It's difficulties that could come back to haunt the town later on. I imagine that all of us need a little more education on it, and maybe I'd be willing to listen to what the story is, but at face value, if it's going to cost this town money, even one thin dime, I'm opposed to it, because we've got enough things that we need rather than want, and I perceive that rail trail as a toy more than anything. Toys are nice, but you don't need them, especially with the financial situation that we're dealing with in town. There's far more important things that we have to put our money towards. If an outside group can fund it, take care of it, and it doesn't cost us a dime, then maybe I'd be willing to sign off on it.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Hi. You know, this is one area I really haven't followed, so I don't know what stage it's in, but I believe Dave's right. I believe the selectmen have signed on to the lease with the MBTA, and there's a nonprofit group that's currently working on the development of it, and I haven't been to any meetings, so I'm sorry, I really can't tell you. I don't believe the Board of Selectmen have much more to do with it as far as I understand.
This is regarding the rail trail, the one question I've been asked the most since I became a candidate. You know, I think it's, I haven't really followed the whole issue. You know, again, like the two other candidates said, the Board of Selectmen is, I believe, in process with the MBTA about getting a lease. The one thing, concern I do have is, disrupting revenue from local businesses. That's very, very much on my mind. However, as we've been kind of a theme of the whole night has been trying to bring the two sides together and try and reach some sort of consensus, which I think intelligent adults can always come to some sort of consensus that will benefit both sides and will satisfy both sides.
Okay. If you don't mind, I just want to follow up because I have some points on that. And just to clarify, so that perhaps Carolyn can respond, but the selectmen last fall voted 2-1 to support the Squanicook Greenways, which is the nonprofit entity that's trying to build this trail. in that letter, the selectmen voted for the town that the town would only provide emergency response services and pursue the construction of a sidewalk in Townsend Harbor. So, given that specific situation, I know you've answered generally, but how would you have voted had you been on the board last fall?
Well, I hate to give an answer not being involved in the meetings, but I think it's a very good idea for us to have the MBTA land as a lease. And years ago, I did meet Bill Rideout and Steve Meehan. They were working very hard on this, and I haven't followed up with some of the details. There were some real concerns for some people. We're a little bit different than the rail trail in Pepperell, whereas the trail would come right up in their backyard. But I thought they had worked out a lot of those situations. I might be wrong. But I would have supported signing the lease for the MBTA.
Okay, thank you. Colin?
I would have probably, I agree, I probably would have supported the looking into the lease for the MBTA, just so that we have all our options on the table. I would be also interested to look into how much, the emergency services have cost in other communities, if they have a similar situation, so we have all the facts to make a proper decision when the time came.
Thank you. David?
Okay, if I had been at that meeting, my vote would have been no. Part of the reason being is just above and beyond the face value of it being, again, disruptive to local businesses down in the harbor, homeowners, privacy issues. The biggest thing that stuck in the back of my mind is whoever takes that lease is responsible for all the benefits you'll receive from it, but also the liabilities. Many stretches of that rail bed right now still have rails laid down and ties. Those would have to be moved out of the way in order to put some kind of a hard pack or even a pavement down. Soon as you start doing that, there's going to be issues. One of the issues that were brought up and was never adequately explained in my mind is right across from the auto body shop in the harbor, there's an old gas station that hasn't been used in decades. As far as I remember, I heard that there is a small amount of petroleum-based waste leaching out of that area across the street, under the road, and into the harbor pond. We, as a town, would be responsible for that. There is an insurance policy that the town would be responsible for, which could be a significant cost to the town. If these things could be explained to me adequately enough that it isn't going to cost us our entire town's revenues to repair something that wasn't even thought of being a problem 50 years ago, then maybe I would consider it. But as of right now, I would never put my signature on a lease for 99 years or any amount of time from the MBTA for that rail bed based on hazardous waste concerns and conservation concerns. I consider myself to be a bit of an outdoors person. I like hiking. I like the fact Townsend's got a lot of places that you can visit, camp, etc. This is one more thing that would be nice, but I don't see it as a necessity. I also see it as not a necessity that's got a lot of potential bad attached to it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Plomondon.
My question has to do with ethical considerations and decisions related to exercising judgment in certain situations in which people have to recuse themselves or should to avoid any appearance of impropriety, as touched upon earlier. My question is to Carolyn Smart, but I'd also like Colin McNabb and Dave Funioli to also comment on it. Recently, there was, as a member of the Capital Planning Committee, Carolyn, you participated in ranking capital planning projects that were submitted to the Board of Selectmen. And my question to you is, did you participate in all the votes, or did you at any point recuse yourself with projects related to either the water department or the West Townsville Reading Room?
No, I didn't. They don't benefit me personally.
Since I'm not a town employee, I didn't feel the need to recuse myself from any of those votes.
Well, I don't belong to the Capital Planning Committee, FinCom, or anything right now. I'm just a citizen like the rest of you, so obviously I had no need to recuse myself. Harkening back to what I said earlier about when I was on the zoning board, I wouldn't have benefited by what was happening, like I said, when I wrote an article for a newspaper, edited an article for the newspaper, but I was warned by town council that even the appearance is enough to trigger the fact that you should recuse yourself. If that's what should have happened, I have no knowledge of that, just as Colin wouldn't, but if I was in that situation, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Okay. I'm not sure how much time we've got, but I think we've got a couple. Okay, there's a gentleman who hasn't asked a question yet. Sir, over on my left.
Christian Oder from 83 Maplewood Drive. My question is, they're currently, the town voted to fund a study to see what could be done with the high school, be it a renovation or the building of a new school. And this is to all the candidates. Would you support either a building renovation or a new high school?
Okay. Carolyn?
We're going to have to do something with the high school, whether it's a renovation or building new. So I was really pleased that we passed the money for a feasibility study. I know the building committee is going to be working hard. The big issue is money. It's a huge capital expense. We have not only the new high school, but we have a new fire station, and we have a septic that needs to be closed at Hawthorne Brook Middle School. I think it's around the $600,000 range. So we're talking about adding a lot to our tax rate. But it is something that needs to be done. We do need to invest in our future, and the high school is in pretty bad shape. Something needs to be done about it. So again, that would go along with careful planning. And it's going to be tough for us, but fortunately, it's a debt exclusion. So when the cost is paid for, it drops off our tax rate.
Colin?
I was fortunate enough to attend North Middlesex when suddenly in the middle of class, water would come pouring through the roof. Something has to be done. And whatever it's basically for me, I'm waiting to see what the feasibility study says about what the recommendation is, whether it's going to be cost effective to rehab the building or build a new one.
Thank you. David?
Okay. It's going to sound like the Love Fest again, but exactly the same scenario as before. The feasibility study should give everybody a clear indication of what needs to happen. If a refurb of the building even gets close to the cost of building a new building, then obviously it's going to come down to probably go for the new building, because North Middlesex, for all of us here that attended that, if you watch the board out in the front there, that was built 45, 50 years ago. I'm surprised the place is still standing, never mind that it might be able to get refurbed. But again, whatever we can do with the least amount of money is what we're going to end up having to do. If it means building a whole new building, then you folks are going to have the ultimate say in that. The feasibility study will just be an indicator. It won't be the determination of what's going to happen.
Okay, I'm going to exercise moderator privilege, and given the same topic, as far as renovation of buildings, we have the proposal for a new fire station, or I believe a study committee investigating that. We have the proposal for renovating the old high school. We have the old library building, which is sitting vacant. We have the old Townsend National Bank building sitting vacant. If we do build a new fire station, we'll have at least 2 more or 3 more fire department buildings vacant. The thing that disturbs me, I guess, is it seems to be we're in a throwaway society, and I was on the building committee for Spalding Memorial School. That was a building that was, I think, very much loved in this town, and because of that, perhaps, people fought to get that building renovated. I guess I'd like to know each of your positions on the surplus of buildings we have and the throwaway mentality that this town seems to have.
It is a shame we do have a perceived quantity of unused buildings, and unfortunately, we don't have enough money to take care of everything the way we should. Yes, again, weighing our needs versus our wants, but we also can't just throw away perfectly good buildings. We're going to have to look at, and that's where these two folks have a lot more experience than I do crunching numbers. What can we afford to refurb? What can we afford to build new? What might we have to look at demolishing once and for all? It's a terrible thing to lose your heritage and some of the buildings that have been here forever in Townsend. But if we can't pay for their upkeep or their refurbishment, we've got to do something with them. Can we lease them out to organizations or to individuals and maybe derive some revenue from them that way? We need to look at it. It's a very real thing that we need to deal with, because for every building we decommission in order to build another one, we're just kind of ignoring a problem instead of addressing it.
Thank you. Carolyn?
I know that if the fire station is approved, I know the building committee is looking at the old buildings. And I'd adhere to their good work, what they'd like to do with them, whether they're leased out. There's been some talk about if they move from 13 Elm Street, it could go to recreation, so other departments could definitely use it. To lump in the old library and the annex building together, I think the small building could be used for an MIS development. You know, we have a lot of computer equipment in Town Hall. We also don't have a lot of filing and storage. As far as the library goes, I know that we did do an RFP. There's been some interest in having it redeveloped and leased out for childhood development. I think something along those lines would be really well, but we don't need to throw our buildings away. We do need to keep them up and find a good plan to continue using them.
Thank you. Colin?
I'm a, lover of history. I enjoy history very much, and there's a joke on the parish council at St. John's that, and I'm going to stress there is no plans whatsoever to take down Father Mealy Hall, none whatsoever, never going to happen. But there was always a running joke that if there ever were any plans, they'd find me chained to the building one morning, which is probably true. I think that I think rehabbing and repurposing the buildings is the way I'd want to go, finding ways that they can benefit the community and kind of adding to the character of the town.
Thank you. All right, Brian.
To all three candidates, this concerns taxes in town. Everybody knows we hate taxes. Recently, I renovated my home that was over 25 years of being in there. I spent a few dollars fixing it up with new heating and air conditioning, what have you. Of course, that came along with a $400 tax increase on my property because we were reassessed a year ago. We had a hard-fought battle in Townsend. Like the gentleman over there said, we brought up the issue on the school and shot it down 3 times. And the administration was creative enough not to lay off people, cut wages, or whatever you have to do to come up with the $400,000. But I commend the selectmen and the town administration on how they managed to pull that out of the hat. But eventually that's going to catch up to us. And what I want to know is how does the potential selectmen up there feel about, other than the 2.5% increase in taxes that are allowed yearly by the state, how they feel about override to pick up these extra costs and not even counting the fire station and the new school, any other costs that may come before the town administration. Would they plan on increasing our taxes by an override, or try to trim the budget. I just want to know what their feelings are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David?
Well, Proposition 2.5 overrides are in your hands. As voters, you decide if you want to raise your own tax rate. Just as a side note on that, I was surprised, and again, this ties into earlier conversation about getting people involved. I had somebody from one of our 3 communities come to me and go, I didn't know that a Proposition 2.5 override was permanent. I thought it was just for that year. Every time we vote as a community for a Prop 2.5 override, your taxes increase permanently. There is such a mechanism called an underride, where if somebody wanted to get creative enough, they could put one on the warrant and we could vote on a reduction in your taxes. That will mean a reduction in the amount of revenue available for the town to spend, but it is an option that you have. As far as an override is concerned, it's like paying for your groceries with a credit card and then not paying the bill at the end of the month and letting it ride. Eventually, you get down to the end of the year and you've spent $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on groceries and you haven't paid a dime towards it. An override should be for something long-term and permanent rather than for just meeting your daily basic needs for a budget. It's not a good idea unless it has to happen.
Thank you. Carolyn?
I didn't support the overrides last year because I didn't feel we had a good plan. I am not against asking the taxpayers to consider raising their taxes. If we'd studied the problem, we can sustain ourselves for 10 years. What I am against is when we don't have a solid plan going forward, we don't understand what our needs are going to be in the next 5 years, and we're just asking for Band-Aids. I don't agree with that. Before I would ever ask anybody to raise their taxes, I would have to be completely convinced that we would need this and we would be sustainable for 10 years, at least.
Thank you. Colin?
I don't like 2.5 overrides, if that's as plain as I can get. You know, when it comes to projects, large projects, I prefer debt exclusions because they go away eventually. But for daily operating of the community, you know, the just operating budget, I'm more in the favor of trimming the budget and saving those votes for a major project that we do need major projects in this town sometimes. It's necessary, you know, infrastructure gets old, we have to put something else in place. But, you know, as a general rule, I prefer not to raise taxes at all.
Okay. All right. Any other last questions? Seems like end that on a high note of no new taxes.
Read my lips.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, looks like we're good. I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank the folks at home. I'd like to thank the candidates. And thanks to Neshoba Publications and Channel 9. And don't forget, town election is April 30th. And town meeting, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is May 7th. May 7th. See you all at the polls and at the town meeting. Thanks.